Europe the end of a dream? You're all European, we are all European, I'm a European, and I'm a German citizen living in Sofia, Bulgaria, and therefore the topic is at my heart. It's very important to me, and I hope it is also very important to you. But when we discussed a possible topic for the annual consultation, there was no other theme which could challenge it. These days, the future of Europe is on everybody's mind, especially after the Brexit vote in the UK, which the English European Timothy Garton Ash had called the biggest defeat of his political life, in an article written in The Guardian. By contrast, many American libertarians rejoiced after the British vote, seeing in the EU, the European Union, the anti-market super-regulator and nanny state which destroyed many economic freedoms and which therefore deserved beaten by the liberty-embracing Britons. The New York Times, in a book review in its August 26th edition, concedes that many Americans tend to struggle to grasp the ways of the European Union, which admittedly are complex and arcane. But the article continues saying that many Europeans can't make sense of it either. And then the author, Paul Hokenos of the New York Times, concludes that the community is indisputably mired in its most acute crisis since its founding in 1950s. To no one's surprise, my newsfeed is overflowing with various contributions on what the future of Europe could be and should be ever since the Brexit. They include blueprints from think tanks, economists, scholars, proposals by EU politicians, including the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe, and by various actors from civic associations and other organized interests. So it's very timely that we liberals living in East and Southeast Europe come together and discuss our ideas as regards the future of Europe. But the Brexit warnings were on the wall much earlier. The skeptical Europhile and journalist Giles Merritt, for instance, outlined in his book Slippery Slope, I brought a copy of it, looks like this, Slippery Slope, I read it on the plane, almost. In his book, published in January 2016, What Could Be Done to Save the European Union? He presented what he calls a flexible menu of politics and proposes 10 remedies to the current ills of the European Union. The European Liberal Forum has done a lot of work over the last couple of years to debate and identify liberal perspectives as far as the future of Europe and the European Union is concerned. They usually include, among others, a decentralized European Union where the principle of subsidiarity is given full recognition. When we formulated the concept, you have also a concept paper in your folder, for this consultation, the British vote was still months away, and we were not behind the British vote, to dramatize our efforts. Now almost every organization concerns itself with the future or with the fallout of the Brexit vote, and every day a new conference, seminar or other activity is asking for, I quote, reboot of Europe, a renewal of the European Union, political reform, rethinking of Europe, and many more. Our open space and the consultation with you will uncover and identify many valuable ideas which will be important for us in the liberal family in Europe and for us as non-state actors in Europe. The consultation will give new impetus for our cooperation and collaboration so that the voices of freedom-loving people and organizations can be more forcefully articulated and strategically employed. Finally, allow me to switch to my own little, more personal story. I grew up in Trier in the 1950s, 60s, a small town in the Mosel River Valley, in the very far west corner of Germany. But Trier has a history It is the old Augusta Treverorum, which was once the capital of the West Roman Empire about 1,700 years ago. And since I have a good memory, I vividly remember this. And of course, we people from Trier, we pride ourselves of being the oldest city in Germany. We talk about the Rome north of the Alps, and local patriotism flourishes, of course. But when you grow up and you are going through the schools, you learn all about it, and when you walk around my hometown, you will see, and you will be confronted with our past, the Roman past mainly. Trier is located about 10 kilometers from Luxembourg, the border to Luxembourg, and about 40 kilometers to the border to France. At that time, when I was a boy, I can still remember, these borders were very highly visible, not only because you had to queue for hours, in cars or wait for long checks of your identity papers before you could cross it. The first foreign language I learned was not Latin, but it was French, the language of the historic arch-enemy of the Germans. Within about 100 years, we Germans had brought war to the French, our neighbors, 3 times. At high school, all our class outings went to France. For instance, we visited Metz, the first sister city of Trier since 1957. Most of you were not born then. Nancy, the graves of Verdun, and the European Parliament, of course, in Strasbourg. When I was a boy, Trier was a French garrison town with up to 20,000 soldiers, French soldiers and their families. It was the largest French garrison in the world after Paris. But German-French reconciliation and the European unification process saw to it that the military and their families were no longer perceived as occupying powers, but rather increasingly as guests and friends. The channeling of the Mosel River began in 1956 with the construction of the Trier River Harbor up to 1964, and that was a German-French-Luxembourg joint undertaking with significant effects on the infrastructure of the region. After 54 years of uninterrupted presence, the last French military unit pulled out of Trier in 1999. This is 10 years after the fall of the Iron Curtain, you can say. So they left as friends. But despite the efforts, to learn each other's language on both sides of the border, I'm not so sure how many French people speak German and how many Germans speak French. But for us, it was a great time growing up with opening up borders. On the weekends, we visited discotheques and clubs in Luxembourg City to enjoy ourselves. We regularly played handball tournaments against teams from France and Luxembourg. And during my university times, that continued. I was studying at the University of Bonn, and we had sister universities all over France. We had one, since I'm an agriculture economist, in Lille, and another one, Montpellier, for law. I visited these cities multiple times during my time at the university. I have also worked as an intern in French farms in Normandy and Bordeaux to get to know France and to learn about its culture and its people. When people in the 1960s and 70s asked me where I came from, I would usually say that I'm from Europe instead of Germany. It was so convenient for a German to hide behind a European identity instead of alluding to the dark German past. I remember very clearly the visit to the family of my friend Dominique Moutard in his hometown Niort, which is in the west of France. We got involved in a heated debate with his father and uncle, who had both fought in the resistance and somehow resented that he had brought a German to his family home, the son of former enemies. So we discussed, and it was clear his father and the uncle, they had fought in the Second World War, and theoretically our fathers could have shot at each other. Whereas the sons worked together on farms, they joked together, they ate together, had fun together, and shared their passions, differences, and similarities. My hometown Trier is a very different place today. It turned from a backwater at the end of Germany, basically, into a vibrant local economy, you can say, which depends very much on the growth center Luxembourg. When I was young, we went to Luxembourg to buy cheap chocolate, coffee, and to fill the tanks of our cars. We still do this after 60 years, but we also work in Luxembourg. Thousands of people from my hometown have found employment in Luxembourg and its thriving economy. Luxembourg added 140,000 jobs last year to its payroll. And the economies are more and more interlinked. People from Luxembourg used to buy cheap goods in the shopping malls in Trier. They still do this, but they also buy apartments, houses, because it's cheaper on the other side of the border, and the taxation system is also different. So a lot of people reside in Germany, but they work in Luxembourg. So recently, actually 2 days ago, the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung summarized this in an article, which of course I jumped on as an old local patriot. If the borders would be closed again, Trier would collapse. There is no way that it could stand on its own and go back to the past. The European Union, which I experienced as a boy, is in no way comparable to the European Union today. The change is tremendous. Borders became invisible. We now move between countries without difficulty, have a common currency, as some of us, and do not regard each other as strangers anymore. And still, that very union is in disarray and in deep crisis as we speak. Also, my native Germany has changed, generations have changed, and with it, the image they enjoy, for that matter, or suffer under. New identities emerge, new opportunities arise, and with it, the constant power of change will break new ways into the lives of many millions of Europeans. During my summer vacation, I was reading a book titled Vanished Kingdoms. It's a 700-something pages read. It's the rise and fall of states and nations. The author is Norman Davies, a Welsh professor of history. Among the vanished kingdoms he describes in his books, there are, for instance, the Kingdom of Aragon, Burgundy, Byzantium, Galicia, but also the Soviet Union. Naturally, I asked myself, would the European Union be among them if Davies would have written the book 20 years from now? Davies reminds his readers about the law of transience and that human nature dictates that everyone is lulled into thinking that disasters only happen to others. Hence, if the end does come, it will come as a surprise. And people think that the law of transience will not apply to them. Davies also reminds us of Plato's metaphor of the ship of state. The idea of a state or union as a great vessel with its helmsman, crew, and a complement of passengers plowing its way through the oceans across the waters. Davies writes, and I quote, "For ships of state do not sail on forever. They sometimes ride the storms and sometimes founder. On occasion, they limp into port to be refitted. On other occasion, damaged beyond repair, they are broken up or they sink." The Lithuanian poet Tomas Venclova is quoted as saying, "We are Europe and Europe's fate is our fate." I think we put the quote in the beginning of the concept paper you have seen. With these words of encouragement and caution, I would like to invite you to share your ideas on the future of Europe with your fellow participants. Let us jointly explore whether the ship of Europe is only slightly damaged, if it can be refitted, and what type of liberal refitting should be contemplated about, what parts of the ship should be salvaged. Let us dream about our Europe and formulate a vision for a Europe in freedom and security. I wish us, all of us, a good hand, excitement, enlightenment, and in the end, lots of fun during the interaction with each other, fellow liberals from Europe working for freedom in various organizations in that region. I would like to thank you here for coming, and with this I conclude my introductory remarks.